Hey, it's Jeff Zito. Welcome to another episode of Celebrity Jobber. First of the new year. Just wanted to let you know some past episodes if you haven't heard the podcast before. Some great ones. Let me tell you, John Oates from Hall & Oates, Brian Johnson from AC/DC, Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon, just to mention a few. Marlon Wayans. You can check out all my guests up on Apple Podcast or wherever you pod. And I urge you, please, to leave a message, or I should say, rate us and give us a review. I wanted to read a couple of today because I urge you and encourage you to leave a review. It kind of helps me, if you will. Irish Kevin 911 writes, such interesting content to hear another side of all these people. It's just outstanding. Zito's such a fantastic interviewer. League of his own. Thanks for a fresh new look. Great stuff. I really do appreciate that, Irish Kevin. Somebody else writes, they don't leave their name, but they write, worth a listen. I've been a fan of Jeff Zito for quite some time now. Jeff's an amazing interviewer with a great sense of humor. Plus, he gets some really cool personalities on the show. I wish I could have rated this more than 5 stars. I highly recommend everybody to give this a listen. Blake Buckley says, great podcast. I enjoy hearing about what these celebrities' paths would have been if they never got their lucky break. Great content. And one more, Colleen Teague says, I've been listening to Jeff Zito for years on the radio, and I enjoy his interviewing style. So interesting to learn what these celebrities did before they got their big break. Great podcast. I look forward to each new episode. Give it a listen. You won't be sorry. Thanks so much, everybody, for commenting, reviewing, rating, Apple Podcasts, like I said, or wherever you pod. The Celebrity Jobber podcast is primarily about people that you know, celebrities. And maybe if they didn't get their big break, they'd be doing something else. Maybe they'd be working at a restaurant, or who knows? You know, we've talked to comedian Stephen Wright. His backup plan was to be like me in radio broadcasting. Well, good thing that didn't happen to Stephen Wright. You never know where people would end up if not for their big break. And this episode is one of my favorites. I'm going to tell you that right now. But he's not quite a huge celebrity yet, but he did just come out with a movie. This past, or I should say about a week ago, Harry Turner is the star of a new documentary, which is called Wildcat. And I urge everybody to watch it because it has to do with reacclimating wild animals back into the wild after maybe they're captured in the Peruvian Amazon and dealt on the black market. But there's a lot to this movie about mental health and suicide, and it kind of talks to you, right before the movie even starts. It says, there's a caption like, hey, warning, there's some pretty deep shit going on here, talking about suicide and mental health. And over the Christmas break, I watched it, and I felt so compelled to find this guy on Instagram and send him a quick message. And he got right back to me the same day. And now he's an episode of Celebrity Jobber. The documentary is called Wildcat. It's on Amazon Prime. And Harry Turner joins us this week on Celebrity Jobber. Harry, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
How are you, man?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, it's been a little bit overwhelming with the amount of response from the film, but everything's been great, so I'm happy about that.
I bet. This podcast, by the way, is called Celebrity Jobber, and I would say that you're a pretty new celebrity. How is that? Has that kind of affected you? Is it kind of a big difference from when you were a regular Joe, maybe a few days ago or a few weeks ago, compared to now, where people want people want to hold up, they want to talk to you, they want to, they're interested in you.
Yeah, I think I've never really been an average Joe. I don't think the average Joe would just go and, immerse themselves into the Peruvian Amazon, but it's definitely been interesting. I've met some really cool people, and a lot of people have reached out, and it's just been a very nice experience from what I've, gone through so far. And I think that, if this can open some doors to potential and, future projects which, help this planet and helps people around us, especially with mental health and PTSD, then, I'm all for it. And, it's been a very kind of like eye-opening experience.
I got to tell you that, it was over the holiday and I spent some time at home and I saw the preview or the trailer for your movie, which is, by the way, this is Harry Turner, and he is the star of a new documentary on Amazon Prime, and it's called Wildcat. And it really got me. First of all, I'm an animal lover, so that was the first thing that, I find intriguing. Anybody that can be in contact with a wild animal, even I don't know if you're familiar with Joe Exotic and Tiger King, Harry, but that stuff still amazes me, even though they're a lot different than you are. You are trying to help animals in the wild, and a guy like Joe Exotic is, probably that's kind of the guy that you would be against. Am I right?
Yeah, so the thing with me personally is I've always loved animals, just like yourself. I've always loved animals growing up. And when I was younger, I used to kind of look up to people like that because I used to be like, that's really cool. But as I kind of like grew up and kind of educated myself more on kind of what was most important for that animal and not for how that person was feeling, it kind of, showed to me that these animals deserve a wild life. They deserve what they need, and what they were put onto this world for. And so for me personally, I've, grown up kind of experiencing, these things. I've grown up with domesticated dogs and cats, and I even grew up actually kind of raising snakes as well. That was kind of like one of my first actual pets. But as I kind of matured and got a bit older, I realized that there's nothing better for this animal than to be in its wild environment. And so the story of Wildcat really kind of just shows me trying to put these animals back into the forest because of humans and the problems that we cause with like illegal logging and deforestation and the wildlife trade and all these different things. I wanted to do my part in this world and actually putting an animal back where it belongs and not being put into either a zoo or into people's hands.
And I'm glad you talked about the illegal logging and the black market kind of stuff, which I want to touch on in a bit. But there's a few things that, and I'm going to try my best because I really want everybody to check out this documentary because I just think it's so great. And it really touched me. And I really felt something for Harry by watching this documentary. And like I said, it was just on a Saturday afternoon, I think. I just found you on Instagram and I messaged you real quick and was just like, hey, man, this was really, really great. I'd love to talk to you on my podcast. And Harry got back to me like in seconds and was like, yes, absolutely. I would love to do it. So I really do appreciate it. A couple things in the documentary that are unclear that maybe I wanted to touch on to get a little perspective. And while doing so, I'm going to try my hardest not to give away any parts of the movie because I really want people to see it. I think it's really important for you to see it. But the number one thing that I wanted to touch on would be, how did you end up in the Peruvian Amazon? It seemed like such a obscure and remote location, 5 hours away from the nearest city. I mean, you were in the jungle. What led you to be in that area of the world?
Yeah, so in 2010, I left school. So I left school with kind of just a few qualifications, nothing kind of great. And I got myself kind of, a part-time job. I was kind of smoking weed and skateboarding, and I wasn't doing anything with my future. I felt very disconnected from everything around me. I just was getting myself in a little bit of trouble. So I decided to, in 2011, join the British Army.
And when you say you left school, Harry, you're talking about you left high school. You graduated from high school and then decided to go into the military.
That's correct, yeah. I left high school in 2010. And in 2011, I joined the British Army. 2 days after my 18th birthday, I actually went to basic training. I spent 6 months there kind of just doing everything that an infantryman, learns. And, I'm 18 years old at the time. I thought I was the bee's knees. I was just doing, I was very patriotic about my country and doing all these things. And then 2 weeks after I passed out from my training, I actually landed myself in Afghanistan. So I didn't really have a kind of I went from full speed ahead straight to Afghanistan. I did a 6-month tour there on Op Herrick 16. I turned 19 in Afghanistan, and then when I came back from Afghanistan, I was struggling a lot. Within my first 5 days of being on tour, I saw somebody get shot in the head. And, at an age of 18, I don't wish that on anybody. It was definitely eye-opening. It caused me a lot of issues and troubles, which I'm still working through to this day. And so for me personally, when I left Afghanistan and I was kind of in the British Army, I was in the British Army, I just wanted to leave. I wanted to get out. I was depressed. I was struggling. I felt nothing, color just seemed like black and gray. And I know a lot of people can relate to that because it's not just me, I'm not just one victim here. This happens to a lot of people. And so I wanted to escape, I wanted to leave. I wanted to honestly end my life. And so I thought, what better place to go than to somewhere which is, classed as one of the most dangerous places on Earth. And so I did a quick Google search and basically landed myself on this website that took volunteers. And I went out there with the intentions to kill myself. And when I was there, I was thinking about suicide every single day. And then on the 14th day, I think, I just come back from fishing. We went fishing to go and, get some fish for dinner. And I was on the front of the boat and the sun was going down and the bats were, changing with the birds and the breeze was in my face. And I just had this epiphany why do you want to kill yourself? What is it about you that wants to die? You're in this incredible place in this, on this beautiful river. What is it that makes you want to die? And after that, I had this second take on life. Wow. And it was just this, it's crazy how, this Google search landed me in the jungle and this jungle brought back this, it was my redemption. I felt revitalized.
So you literally found the most remote location in the world to travel to kill yourself.
Yeah, when I actually went to Peru, I didn't know what currency they used. I didn't know what language they spoke. I was in such a deep, dark depression that I actually just, I just bought a ticket and I didn't care where I was going. I just went there. But it actually turned out to be one of the most incredible places I've ever been in my life. And
it looks incredible. And it definitely looked like it was very difficult to survive in that type of atmosphere and that type of climate. But so tell me about, you met Sam. Sam in the documentary is a woman who's going to college and is an activist for wildlife. And she had a small little sanctuary / rehabilitation center for animals that ended up, like you said earlier, illegal logging and being sold on the black market. And what she would do is she would rescue these animals, bring them to her facility, rehab them enough to get them more acclimated to living in the wildlife again, and kind of rehab the animals. And so how did you hook up with her? Was that during your Google search and you saw that there was that facility in Peru and that's how you got there?
No, so I actually started that facility with Sam. When I first met Sam in 2015, she was just doing her master's, and she was just down in Peru, and we just bumped into each other, and then we became friends at that time. And so we saw that there was an issue, and we decided that we needed to change that. So at the time, when Khan came about, there was no facility, there was no nothing. We just had a piece of land, and Khan was the first ocelot that was rescued. Khan was the first animal that was ever really helped by myself and by me and Sam.
And Khan was an ocelot that was a little baby kitten at like maybe a few weeks old, and this kind of starts the movie off where you find this little cat who would be a dangerous, full-grown wildcat ocelot in the Peruvian jungle. At one point in time, you find this little kitten, and the movie kind of starts off about you trying to rehabilitate or at least reacclimate this small cat into the wildlife as a small little kitten.
You know, when he was first found, his eyes were still closed, and, you know, he had only ever felt the touch of his mother and the touch of illegal loggers. So when he came into my hands, I knew that I needed to do absolutely everything that I could. I needed to make him feel safe, and so what I would do is I would sleep with him in my hammock. I needed to make sure that he was hydrated and he was going to the bathroom. I needed to make sure that he heard my voice and he felt safety. And so for the first few weeks, I just stayed with him nonstop. Wherever I went, he would go. Wherever he would sleep, I would sleep. It was just one of these things that I needed him to feel safe, because before he could become this aggressive, dangerous, and you know, beast of the forest, he needed to have that security like any small mammal needs. You can't just, you know, take a child and, you know, an orphan child and kind of like push them to be the best that they can. They need to have that security, and they need to have that teacher. So I became that mother and that teacher at a very young age. And then from then on, without ruining the film itself, things developed and things changed.
Tell me about the illegal logging in Peru and the black market, you know, sale of exotic animals, and what kind of a problem it is. Yeah,
so before and after the pandemic, deforestation has been a huge issue. Now you have big, you know, deforestation areas which have been, you know, cut and burned, because what people do is they put cattle on these areas so that they can make a living. And the other reason why is they slash and burn so that then they can have an area to grow food for, you know, bananas or plantains, yucca. And so deforestation is a huge thing, but selective logging is another big thing. Selective logging is actually when people go into the forest and they find some of the biggest and healthiest, you know, hardwood trees, and they cut them down. And the problem with cutting down selective trees is that these trees are homes to thousands and thousands of animals. You know, if you go from the root system, which, you know, incorporates smaller lizards and snakes and frogs, to all different types of invertebrate, all the way up, you know, with porcupines and sloths. And then you go into the canopy where you have like the nesting birds of like the macaws and the toucans. You know, cutting down one of these trees kills off, you know, a lifeline for so many things. And when people go and selectively cut a tree, they will also selectively kill these animals, or you know, take these animals out. And then when they've cut down the tree and they find a baby ocelot, or they find a baby macaw, or they find the babies, they then take them to the black market. Now, the black market isn't just a place where you can go and you can, you know, pick out an ocelot or anything. It's a very secretive kind of dark mafia type style market where it's kind of unheard of and unspoken, but a lot of the local people understand, and they know people in Asia, and they know people across the world who will buy baby ocelots, and they will buy baby jaguars. And so it's a very kind of like, it's all intertwined. If you're going to be cutting down trees and you're going to be taking, a life like such as big as a tree, you're going to be taking lives of other animals, and therefore, if you're making a small, tiny amount of money off of, hardwood, you're going to try and make a little bit more money by selling these animals. And it's just such a heart-wrenching kind of thing to witness and to be a part of.
Yeah.
I've seen deforestation firsthand. I've seen, animals being taken. I've seen animals being killed. And it is, just one of these awful things which we as humans just take for granted. We think that because we have shotguns and because we are a superior being, in the grand scheme of things, we can do these things. But honestly, we can't, and it shows that we can't, because this world is kind of fighting back to put us in our place. Look, just what the pandemic did.
How long did you spend in the Amazon jungle? And I wanted to know, what the hell did you eat? You didn't look malnourished. You looked like you were a good-sized guy. But I was just wondering, man, I saw the platform that you were living in for, it's got to be at least a year and a half or 2 years. What the hell did you eat every day to survive and maintain, your weight?
Yeah, so I've spent, many years in the jungle at this point. And with the Keanu project, I actually spent 670 days in the jungle. 512 of them were illegal because I had actually overstayed my passport and my visa. But to be honest, all I had to do was pay a fine, and I would have done that any day just to help that animal out.
Right.
But yeah, food was a tough one. I would get shipments of food, either every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. I lived on basically rice and potatoes because they kept very well.
Right.
I enjoyed going fishing, and whenever me and Keanu would, catch an animal, we would share it. So if I went fishing and caught a fish, I would give him the bits I didn't want and eat the bits I wanted. And if he caught a bird or something, or a caiman, then, we would just share it. It was like a very kind of like amazing and kind of like unusual relationship. But, I survived pretty well. There were some times in the film that you see that I get very sick. And that's just because of water. That's just because of insects. I've had dengue twice. I've had leishmaniasis, which is a skin-eating disease. I've had over 70 botflies. I've had giardia. You name it. I've been pretty sick. So I had to keep my health up with food, and some of them shipments would definitely have some decent food in it. And it was hard, but I wouldn't change it for the world. And
Keanu is the second cat that you'll see has a relationship in the movie with Harry. Once again, without, I don't want to talk too much about what happens in the movie, even though I want to, have these conversations with you so bad. I really want people to see this because I think it's important. But I wanted to ask you about your relationship with Keanu, and if you happen to see him again after what we left off with him in the movie. We did see, they had you had cameras up sometimes in the jungle, and you were able to identify him and say, oh, there he is. But have you ever maintained contact or seen him again since the movie? And do you plan on it?
The thing with a reintroduction of a wild animal is that, as much as I want to go and try and find him to make sure that he is okay, it would kind of destroy the actual process of the reintroduction. I spent so many months on end just making him as wild as he can so that when I left, he could fend for himself. And, the desire to go and try and find him is, it's a hard one to fight off, but I know for the best of his interest, I need to do that. And it's one of them things where I left the jungle in 2019, and then 8 months later, he was actually seen on camera trap. But he was seen on the very, very border of the land of where I released him. And so with males, they have, territories. And from what I could tell is that he was moving out of that territory because of other males. And so in my heart, I know that he is out there doing what he needs to do. I hope that he's bred and there's other little Keanus running about. But at the end of the day, I did this project for one reason and one reason only, and that was to put a wild cat back where he belongs, and I wouldn't want to disturb that in any way.
And when was the last time that you saw him on camera? Have you seen him since the time that we saw him in the movie?
There was one time after the So in the film it says that he was seen about 6 months after. There was another occasion actually 2 months after that where he was caught, just a small glimpse of him. And so 8 months being alone in the jungle is a long time, especially in the Amazon rainforest where it's so dangerous and so hard to live. That is, in my eyes, a great success for him.
Absolutely. And Harry, what made you, can you kind of walk us through how this documentary came to be? I mean, because it is so personal. And again, I don't want to get too personal with you because you do lay it all out on the line in this film, which is incredibly brave. And it's incredibly helpful to other people who are going through some sort of mental illness or PTSD. I mean, just absolutely, so helpful, so brave of you. But how did the whole documentary come into play? What led you to do this and be now, on the Celebrity Jobber podcast?
So the reason why this actually became a documentary wasn't because it was, an idea of a documentary to begin with. It actually was just I was recording and I was documenting all these things just because I had this passion. I had this, I was 21 years old. I was walking barefoot in the jungle with an ocelot, and I thought, what better way to remember this than just to make memories by recording this? And so with Khan, I was just recording little clips, little bits and pieces, because I was like, this is absolutely phenomenal. Like, this is incredible. I never, ever in a million years, not when I was in Afghanistan, not when I was younger, thought I would be doing this incredible stuff. And so the documentary really kind of started after Keanu, and I was in the frontier town of Puerto Maldonado in Peru, and I bumped into a National Geographic photographer called Trevor Frost. And he said to me, like, hey, like, I've heard your story. Like, this sounds really cool. Do you mind if I see some of the footage that you have of Khan? So I went and grabbed my hard drive and my laptop, and I pulled up a few videos. Some of the clips, actually, you do see in the documentary. And he was like, wow, we have, a documentary here, just a short one. And I was like, okay, cool, like, this would be really cool. I want Khan to be known, and I, want conservation to be, seen in the world. And then about 2 months after that, Keanu, the second ocelot, came into the picture, and from there on out, they brought cameras down, they brought sound, they brought, so many other bits and pieces to the jungle so that I could just record Keanu to the absolute fullest in 4K and capture as many, many moments as I possibly could. And without Keanu, this story would not be as powerful. And to remember both of these incredible cats. And so the documentary just kind of started on that way. But the great thing about filmmaking is that when you're making a film, the story, it changes with time.
Right.
And the filmmakers, even though I filmed the majority of this documentary, the filmmakers are there recording bits and pieces as well, and they were seeing that I was struggling deeply with my mental health. But I wouldn't give up because I just wanted to push on and make sure that this animal or these animals were, going to survive. You know, they were my reason to live, and they were my reason to keep pushing on. And so therefore it really became a film not just about conservation, but about mental health as well.
I got to tell you, man, and for you to put yourself out there for everybody to see, because we're talking about very, very personal issues. You were in the military. You saw people shot. You saw people killed. You told a story about holding a young girl in your arms, her father crying, you saying to yourself, I shouldn't be here. You have to now carry that on for the rest of your life, thinking about that moment as you were doing the patriotic thing for your country. And you have to take all of that, take that on, and now you're putting it out there for the world to see. Was there any part of you that said, okay, you know what, that's just too personal, take that out of the film?
Oh, absolutely. There were so many times where, you know, I was scared I was going to look weak. I was worried that, you know, I was, you know, it's a very vulnerable film for myself. And there were so many times where I just wanted to give up on this whole documentary because I didn't want myself to look that way. But at the end of the day, what is more important is making sure that conservation and animals like Khan and Keanu are, you know, respected, remembered, and learnt about by people. You'll be surprised how many people don't know what an ocelot is. And also to show people who struggle with mental health that you're not alone. There's so many people in the world that have fought for their country or have gone through some, you know, traumatic experiences in their life, and they feel like they're alone. And, you know, with statistics, 22 veterans a day in the U.S. alone kill themselves. And if this film can help someone see some light and see some light at the end of the tunnel and save that life, then that's what I want this film to do. So for me to be vulnerable, I hope that it can change the idea of mental health and change the idea of conservation.
It was really eye-opening for someone like me, who, I'm pro-military. And I'm thankful for you guys every day, whether you're for, you know, the U.S. or the UK, it doesn't matter. I'm thankful for all you guys, going out there, risking your life. You got more balls than anybody, else on this planet. And I give you guys, all the credit, and I give you so much props, man. But how are you doing mentally today, Harry? Because honestly, that was a big concern of mine when the movie ended. I was like, well, how is this guy? I mean, this guy is struggling. I mean, you were struggling. You were at times a mess. And I think nobody saw you as weak. I mean, what you went through is enough for people to understand why you would have these feelings. But how are you today? And have you gotten any kind of help from anyone?
So, yeah, I left the jungle obviously very kind of defeated, and I needed some R&R. I needed that time to kind of like really kind of like rest and recover. And, I just decided that, I needed to focus on myself more. I started talking to my now fiance, Lexi, and, we have, traveled the world, and we've started doing some really cool projects. We actually just started our own nonprofit called Emerald Arch. And, I have all of these things, especially with the film coming out, which, I want to help with and I want to do. Like, I feel like in the jungle I had a few purposes, and the main one was to make sure that Khan and Keanu went back into the wild. But now, I don't have Khan or Keanu in my life to keep me going, but I have all of these other reasons to keep pushing. And for me personally, it's hard. I still struggle, don't get me wrong. I still have bad days. The other day was, quite a hard day for me to get out of bed, and I had a lot of messages to reply to and a lot of emails, and I felt overwhelmed, but at the end of the day, I know that I'm going to do good. And one of the things with my nonprofit, Emerald Arch, is that we're going to be fundraising to buy land for it. Well, we're going to be buying land in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and one of the main projects for that is actually going to be buying land and making a retreat so that people struggling with PTSD, it doesn't matter whether you've served or you are just struggling in general, there will be a place for you to come to the jungle and where you can reset. And as I said earlier on in the podcast, it took me about 14 days to really realize that, I was needed. And that when I was on the front of the boat, I felt like I didn't have to die. And I want to give that opportunity to other people, especially veterans who have struggled a lot and have, gone through some really dark times. I want to give them that opportunity to go to the jungle and to reset and to kind of rethink their life a little bit.
Harry, what was your first job? And I'm talking about your very first paying job. Did it have anything to do with animals, or were you painting houses in the summer? But what was your very first paying job?
Yeah, so when I was in school, I wanted to earn some money. And the only way that I could really do that at such a young age was to go and knock on doors and to see if anyone would like their dog being walked.
Wow.
And I had this lovely lady who lived 2 doors down from me who was a little bit older. And she had this small dog that she just needed to be taken out, once in the evening just so he can go out and stretch his legs and walk about. And for about a year, I just used to walk this dog every single day just to get me out the house and to help this lady and to, put a little bit of money in my pocket. And so, yeah, my first ever job was actually with animals.
Wow. Amazing. And what would you like to become? What would you like to see this movie do for you and your future? And I know that you want to help animals, and very admirable, and that's awesome. But I do hope that you want something for yourself, because you do deserve that. What do you hope this movie lets you become in the future? What are your goals to do?
So I want Emerald Arch, my nonprofit, to succeed. I want to raise money, and I want to protect forests, protect land, and help people struggling with PTSD. But what I personally want is to be an advocate for animal conservation and world conservation, and be an advocate for mental health. And so I would love to start doing public speaking. I would love to kind of just be a face to conservational and mental health awareness. And I would just love to continue doing what I love. And that's, being where I feel like I belong the most in the jungle, and helping as many people and as many animals along the way.
I think you're, by the way, for a guy that's been in a public speaking and in the broadcast business his whole life, I think you're an excellent public speaker for being as young as you are. I think you're going to have a great career helping people and being able to bring your message and being able to communicate to people what you've already communicated here today at such a young age. Once again, I think that you've got a great career ahead of you. And I was even worried a little bit about, I was like, even watching the film, being American and listening to you got a thick UK accent in the film. And I was like, okay, well, I hope I can, be able to communicate properly with Harry and understand him. And man, just quite the opposite. I think you're an excellent speaker. You're going to have a great career ahead of you. I wish you the best. What do you think was your big break, if I could put it in those words? Your big break. I mean, before the film, you were Harry Turner, guy from the UK, guy that served in the British Army, and a guy that liked animals and wanted to help animals. But since December 30th, you're different. You're Harry Turner, star of the documentary Wildcat on Prime. So what do you think your big break was? Was it meeting that guy from National Geographic in the jungle? Was it hooking up with Sam? What series of events do you think it was that led you to where you are today?
I think my big break was actually probably my breaking point. And that was when I decided to take the biggest leap of faith in my life and just buy a ticket to Peru. If I hadn't have gone to Peru, I would never have met some of the people I've met. I would never have, encountered the ocelots that I did. This film would never have been a thing. And so I honestly believe that one leap of faith that I, just dove into at the deep end, that was probably it. It's very hard, a lot of people send me messages like, how do I do what you do? And where do you think I should start when I go into these things? And the start is, if you have a burning desire in your heart and if your gut is telling you to do something, you really just need to take that leap of faith. If I hadn't have just bought that ticket to Peru, I don't know where I'd be now. Probably, I probably would have committed suicide. And that's, no joke. I was in such a dark place that if I hadn't have taken that leap of faith, I honestly do not know where myself or my family would be at this point.
And I'm so glad that you did take that leap of faith. I'm so glad that you addressed your mental health. Your family seemed like just such great family, very supportive. I don't know if, I could have dreamed my family would be supportive of me moving to a remote part of the Amazon jungle for animal conservation. You just had such a great family, and your mom, your dad, your little brother. I just urge everybody to watch this on so many different levels. It just meant a lot. I just think it's something you need to see, and I'm so glad you made the movie, Harry, and I'm so glad you put your mental health on the line, even though I don't think you had to. I think it's extremely personal. I think you put so much out there. It was very brave. But everybody, and I mean everybody, including myself to some degree, we all have our own shit, everybody's kind of fucked up in their own way. You being a little bit more extreme than others, but still with you telling that story and putting it out there, it really is helpful, and it really does. You got to see the movie. It's called Wildcat. It's on Amazon Prime, and Harry Turner is our guest today on Celebrity Jobber. I could talk to you for another half an hour about the movie stuff, but again, I want people to watch the film, and you're a really good guy, man. It was really good talking to you, and I wish you nothing but success.
I appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, there you go. This is definitely one of my favorite episodes of Celebrity Jobber because I was just so moved by this documentary. And by the way, Wildcat, not only on Amazon Prime, but in theaters as well. I urge you to check it out. And also, I urge you to check out Harry's Instagram, which is at Harry_Turner. And that's on Instagram. And the Emerald Arc is his nonprofit, www.emeraldarc.org. And again, on Instagram at emerald.arc. By the way, once again, you want to check out some previous episodes of the Celebrity Jobber podcast. Warren Haynes from the Allman Brothers, Dave Snake Sabo from the band Skid Row, comedian Stephen Wright, Marlon Wayans, and so many more. Shannon Larkin from Godsmack, just to name a few. And thanks again for all your ratings and reviews. I'll read some more next week if you care to leave a review up on Apple Podcast or wherever you pod. I appreciate you so much. Thanks again for listening. I'm Jeff Zito, and we'll be back again next week with another episode of Celebrity Jobber. We'll see you then.